so continuing on with this neutralizing our scene. So we've kind of done this min effect and kind of darkening in different areas, but I'm going to go back with a slight eraser and just actually brighten up some areas. So the whole idea of this is to get everything neutral. And we want everything to be in a neutral shadow. So think of that. So the values that we see this shadow area in is where we're trying to get the shadow values everywhere. So I just want to point out, like, some areas are going too dark, and that's what we don't want to do, because we want to maintain that detail. Even though it's a night scene, we don't want to lose all of the detail and have really crunchy, complete darkness in our scene. We might add contrast later, but we don't want to do that too early on. So what I'm going to do is take this paintbrush and go to the eraser and just kind of set it to 0.05, and then just start to erase some of the stuff we just did. So I'm going to set it to 0.03 and just try to keep some of the detail, but don't have areas like this that are super bright. So again, I'm going to go back. Some of the darker areas might not have even needed to be darkened because, you know, they were already in shadow. So you really want to only apply this darkening effect to areas that were in light. You don't want to apply it to areas that are already in shadow. Maybe a little bit, but not much. So that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to reduce the highlight areas into what looks like shadow. So I'm just going back here and just kind of dabbing around with this very soft brush. I'm just tapping and just removing some of the painting that we did. So like this area, maybe it's a little bit just too dark, because if you look at the original footage, it's already in a little bit of shadow. So I don't want to darken it too much. The areas that are too bright are areas like this bright wall, areas like this kind of overhang here. This thing might be a little bit too darkened, so I'll just bring a little bit of that brightness back. So I'm just kind of tapping back in and kind of bringing some of that back. So we'll do that, and I think that's pretty good. It's getting a kind of a neutral effect. You see here, maybe it's darkening a little bit too much. If I'm going back and forth, hitting 1 and 2, you see this area is already in shadow. We don't need to darken it as much as I just did. So I'm just kind of erasing a little bit. And keeping some of that value. Like this area, way too bright, so we would just paint like half of it and get rid of that highlight. But maybe near the top, we could restore a little bit, so it's kind of a neutral. You see half of it's in light and half of it's in shadow. So the shadow areas we don't need to affect as strongly. I'll take the brush again here and maybe just reduce some of this, this very strong beam of highlight here. And I'll paint this kind of curb as well, because it kind of stands out. You see, if I zoom out, you see how it's yellow and how it's standing out, it's popping out. It doesn't feel in this kind of shadow. So I'm just kind of painting that down a little bit stronger than some other areas. Again, looking here, I'm just zooming in and out, and you'll see me do this often. It's kind of annoying to watch. Maybe I'll try not to do it too erratically, but I'm zooming in and out because I need to see the picture as a whole, and I need to zoom in and see if anything stands out. So for example, what stands out to me immediately, this little pillar here, it's just too bright because we're catching some sunlight. So I'm just gonna go in there, make sure I'm set to brush mode, so we're painting in our painting in our alpha here. So this is the min, and I'm just using our paintbrush that we were already doing here to mask this effect. And any really bright areas, we'll just knock them down a little bit. Maybe this little square here stands out to us. You know, some of these little curtains are a little bit bright, so we can kind of knock those down. And I think that's pretty good. So that's kind of a neutral sort of looking scene. Maybe up here a little bit too bright on this triangle wall, so we'll just knock that down very slightly. All right, so the next thing we want to do is this neutralize darkness effect. So what I did was I just I took the gain and gamma like this. So I took the gain down, which is not going to add contrast, and I actually gammaed up a little bit, which is going to make our image more flat. So I'll just show you real quick. If I go here and we start to take the brightness down in our scene, we're getting more of a neutral dark scene. and then I just gamma up a little bit, which is going to bring some of our very dark areas back into detail. So like the curtain and stuff like this, you see it's going really black and dark, and we're just by gammaing up, you're taking the lower end of the image and just bringing it up, and we're kind of having a flatter image, which is a good place to start. The next thing I did was I started to add our blue effect. So this is like a good starting place, but we want to start to add our base color, which is like, if we study our reference, it's that kind of dark blue. So what I did here, if I just go to it, we can see it's kind of this saturated dark blue, and we add a little bit of contrast. So if I go to the node here, so far what we've done, let me set this to 1 so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. So far we did a little bit of gain down and a little bit of gamma up. So we get that flat image. And also that helps with the highlights. If you notice, you see all these pinging highlights, they go away, which we want because we want to add them selectively. We don't want to have strong highlights anywhere in the scene. This almost looks like an HDR scene. So there's not, it looks like there's a very wide dynamic range. But if we go here, we'll add a little bit of blue, and we'll start to gamma down, which is going to add contrast and get it in a level that feels pretty good. Again, when I was doing these colors, always studying color reference. So if I go back to our references here, some of these are not provided again because of the copyright, but if we just go back and look at the general levels of contrast, these are extremely contrasty images, which we're going to add back into the shot. But it's easier, you know, this is a pretty good reference. So we can see quite a lot of range, contrast range in here, which ours is kind of getting back already a little bit by just doing these tweaks here. So I just like to start with a very flat one and then start to add the contrast right back with the color. And the last thing I did was I wanted to desaturate the shadows a little bit, just so we're not having such a saturated image. So all I did was I took a keyer, plug it in here, and invert it so we can select the shadows, and we'll just pull that down. And this is selecting more of the shadow region. And we'll just take a saturation node and just take that down a little bit. And the reason we don't want oversaturated shadows is because we're going to re-add a lot of colors back in. We're trying to create kind of a neutral looking nighttime scene, but not oversaturated. And the reason I'm desaturating the shadows and not the overall shot is because when we add that gamma, gamma always saturates your shot. So if I just take a normal grade here and show you, if I take a gamma and I gamma down, you'll see it adds color. It actually adds color to everything. If you look at that yellow and how, for example, flat it is, but as soon as I add that contrast, it's also making it more yellow. So it's adding more color. So on the lower ends of the image, we need to desaturate them to counteract that contrast. So we want the contrast, but not the saturation. So that's why we're doing the gamma, color add, and then we desaturate the shadows. And that's good for kind of neutralizing that scene.